We appreciate everyone coming out to the first annual event, Night at the Friendly Tavern. So very excited to have all of you join us here this evening. My name is Devin Borman. I'm with the Community Foundation of Southeast Kansas. I was asked to interview or ask questions to our historians up here. So we're excited for the event. The first thing I would like to do is just have everybody introduce themselves for just a moment. So if you're not familiar with all of our group up here, let me know who is speaking to you. So we'll start off with some brief introductions, then we'll dive into some interesting history about our area. So Jim, we'll start down here with you if you don't mind.
Jim Van Beesler from Pittsburg, born and raised here, love it, stay.
Waiver Van Beesler, born and raised near Columbus, and I've been here much longer than I was there. This is all.
Pamela Postone. I spent the first 32 years of my life in this wonderful city, and live close by now in Joplin, Missouri.
My name is Jerry Lomschick, and I'm a retired registered nurse, and I worked here in the hospital for 20 years, and then for the state of Kansas for about another 20 years. And I live at Chicopee, and I've lived around Chicopee my entire life. The only time that I was gone was when I was gone to service. So.
I'm Phyllis Bittner. I was raised in Franklin and Arma area and spent a lot of time in Pittsburgh, and during my married years I lived in Pittsburgh. We owned and operated Dittmer Motors, and then we had the Classic Car Museum in Arma, and I'm associated with the Miners Hall Museum.
I'm Dave Meyer. I live in Franklin, Kansas, just close to the community center, but right up there in the big city of Franklin. Here we go.
Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name, and now we know everybody's name here. So the Friendly Tavern was a real place. How many of you remember the Friendly Tavern? I'm a little too young, I do not recall that, but Pam here is familiar with the Friendly Tavern, and she's going to give us a little bit of a virtual tour to join us on reminiscing about the tavern.
Well, I guess I knew I spent a lot of time down there, and that's why. Actually, Leo and Bernie Drenick ran the Friendly Tavern prior to that, their father. And my father, who was Francis Postine, was good friends with Leo Drenick. And apparently they did Golden Gloves together. And Dad used to take me down there when I was just knee-high and set me up on the bar, and they'd get me a bottle of grape knee-high and some chips. And I was thinking about that coming over here. You know, the times are different now. Back in those days, this was a gathering place for friends and family, and you always felt welcome there, always. Walking into the Friendly, you had a front door and a back door, and I believe it was at the corner, was it Washington and Broadway? And somebody was telling me it's for sale now. When you walked in there was a big long bar running along the south wall with lots and lots and lots of special things that Leo and Bernie collected. And lots of beer signs, beautiful beer signs. I remember talking Leo out of one of them with a waterfall. I think it was called Old Milwaukee. Anyway, they had pool tables, 3 of them if I remember correctly. They had the first Pong machine in Pittsburgh, if any of you remember what Pong is. It was very popular. They also had a machine with a helicopter that you could fly. They had it was like shuffleboard, and it was the bowling, you would knock the pins down. And everybody was made to feel welcome there. Leo and my dad apparently went back to Golden Gloves, and Leo told me a story one time that he and my dad took on 6 guys and beat them all up. Also in the Friendly, they had gourmet pickles, and they had Penrose sausages, and Leo had the best conies. I can remember eating those conies. They were so good. And then once a year, he and Bernie would put together horseradish, and they'd sell you a jar of horseradish that they made, homemade horseradish. And went to the Friendly all the way through high school. And those of you who have grown up in Pittsburgh know that we had 3.2 beer, and we could start drinking beer at 18. That was back in the old days. Yeah, and so some of us, when we were still in high school, we managed to go into the Friendly. And Leo always knew who we were. But there were several other places you could go to. And we were talking, Mr. Olmstek here, we were talking about Mary's out in Chicopee. And go out to Mary's, which I found out later was my family's grocery store that had been moved from 4th Street to Chicopee. And Mary bought it and turned it into a little bar. But Leo and Bernie Drenick would be so proud of this gathering and to remember them, because they were always so welcoming and everybody was treated equally. And it was a comfortable place to be. Jukebox had great old country western songs on it, and just a fun place to be. And now we have the Frisco Event Center, which is a really, really nice place to be too.
Thank you very much, Pam. Nice picture of the tavern. I can picture it in my head. And I think Larry did just walk to the back, but we can't pass without thanking Larry Fields and Suki Fields, who own the Frisco Event Center here, for hosting us this evening. So thank you, Larry and Suki. So as you heard Jerry mention during his introduction, from Chicopee. So Jerry, what was Chicopee like? And I think we all know the church that's still there. Was there more than one church at one point there in Chicopee?
Yeah, there's only one church in Chicopee. That was a Catholic church there, because immigrants there were predominantly Catholic. And the church was actually, as a parish, started in 1890. And it was named St. Barbara's Parish because St. Barbara was the patron saint for miners. And so that's how it got its name. But there was a lot of other things in Chicopee besides just the church. I'm kind of a local historian there, and at one point, probably about 1910, I see where there was 15 saloons in Chicopee at that time. Chicopee reached its peak in population in 1910, and we had about 1,600 people there. Today, there's about 350 people in Chicopee, and we still have a number of things going on. We have a beauty shop there, and we have the country club, and that type of thing. As far as beer joints go, I can remember three. One, I was just very small, and that was Mike's, and that sat there on Chicopee Corner, and now that's Frankie Pazvino's house. He turned it into a house. The other one was out in West Chicopee. You see, there was Chicopee, and then there was West Chicopee. The West Chicopee was where the Italians lived out there, and it was also called Little Italy. And Scotty Scaramucci had Scotty's place out in West Chicopee, and that was kind of like what you were talking about at the Friendly, where, yeah. And the other one was Mary's. And I'll give you a little history about that building because I own it now. It started out, was your grandfather, I believe. Andrew Posteye built that building in 1910 in Ashley. Ashley was a coal camp that was a mile south of Chicopee. So I might digress there just a little bit. You know, we forget sometimes how many coal camps there were around in the area. In the Chicopee area, within 2 miles, I can give you the name of 5 different coal camps within 2 miles of Chicopee, besides Chicopee and West Chicopee. You know, so that's how big the mining industry was here. But Andrew Posteye built that building there, and he started as a tavern for just a little while, and his wife really didn't like that, so she made him turn it into a grocery store. And then when they moved to Pittsburgh, they just took the building with them, and it sat at the corner of 4th Street and Smith, just across the road from where Bo's One Stop is now. And then in about 1941, George Papadakis bought that building. That's when they closed the grocery store there, and he moved it to Chicopee. And he had it as a bar for a little while, and then he sold it to Mary Scott, and then it became known as Mary's. Like she said, I think every young guy got their first beer at Mary's probably, and before they were 18. So it was kind of a colorful place. I might mention just a little bit without getting too far carried away. There was two priests that came from Italy in 1910. And when they came here, they couldn't speak English, and they went to Wichita to meet the bishop. And when they got there, they told them that they were going to be sent to Chicopee. And the other priest told them, says, "Oh, that's an immoral place you're going to." Throughout the history of Chicopee, there's always the tradition that there was 51 unsolved murders in the history of Chicopee. And I don't know whether that's true. I've investigated a lot of them. I have records of a lot of them, but I don't know if that's true. But there was a lot of unsolved murders there during the heyday of it.
Thank you, Jerry. Phil, so we've heard a little bit about Pittsburgh and about Cherokee. So where did you like to go to listen to live music, to dance, and to have some fun?
Well, I'm a 60s girl, so I even considered putting on a mini skirt and some go-go boots to put everybody in the mood. But I didn't want to embarrass myself, so, but that was back what it was in the 60s, and our place to go was the Tower. There were other dance places to go in the area, but every Wednesday and Saturday night, and now that I look back and I think, a Wednesday night, that was a school night, and yet I can remember we started going when we were freshmen. I don't remember ever not being allowed to go in or questioned about our age or anything. And I lived in Franklin, but I went to high school in Arma, and there were about 8 of us girls, and it was like coming to the city to come to Pittsburgh and to go to the Tower. It was a big deal, and my parents brought us, and so I don't know if they were corrupting us, or if they thought that it was safe. It was much safer for them to bring us and then pick us up and take us home. So, but they brought us in on Wednesday and Saturday nights, and everyone loved that my parents were so accommodating to drive us in their old car. I mean, it was an old car, and we were embarrassed, and we wanted to be let off towards the back, so the boys wouldn't see us coming in that old car, you know. And the Tower was the place to be, and that during that time was when Chubby Checker was there, the Seabrings played there, Connie and the Bellhawks, Rodney and the Blazers was a big deal. They were, what was it? In New York City, the Peppermint Lounge in New York City they played, and they played at the Golden Nugget in Vegas, and they were at the Tower. So there were a lot of big name bands that came, but we went for the companionship. We were, it was just a different time then. No one was on a phone. And everyone danced. I don't know, now you go and you see a few people on the dance floor. Everyone danced. If the music started, everyone just couldn't wait to get out on the dance floor. And so I was thinking last night about this, just trying to put a few things together, and I was thinking how funny some of the names were. But of course the big one in the 60s era was the Twist. That was the big thing. And then the Beatles were the big singing group during that time. But some of the dances were, and some of you may remember this, the Jerk, the Pony, the Wah-Wah-Tusi. They all had some of the greatest names, you know. So it was all just a great time to do that, and that was how we spent our Wednesday and Saturday nights, was always at the Tower. Barney's was on the north side of it, which was a hamburger drive-in place, and then on the other side was Tommy's Drive-In, and then across the street was 69 Speedway. So just that little area right there was plenty of things, for people to do. But our focus was to get to the Tower. That's where everyone was. We made all of our friendships there, and just really enjoyed growing up as a teenager in those years.
Thank you, Phyllis. So we've heard a little bit about, obviously, some of the fun, and hopefully those will bring back some memories for all of you. Then we're gonna switch, just to think about what life was like in Pittsburgh a little bit, or in Crawford County, in this area at the time. So, Jim, the next question is for you. And what was it like to be a business owner in Pittsburgh with a young family at this time?
Well, I was a machinist at P&M Coal Company on Big Cruises, and okay. I was a machinist at Big, and in 1962, I started there, and in 68, I decided I was gonna stand next to a lathe the rest of my life. I thought I'd stand next to my own, and we talked it over, and one day I was going out there to work, and I thought, man, I started in my basement. We had half a basement, and I had half of it. She had to have room for a washer and dryer. I don't know why, but she did. Anyway, I went home that night. I decided I'd give him 2 weeks notice that day, and I went home that night and told her, I said, well, I quit my job. I'm going to do machine work full time. She said, okay. That was about it, and from there we built a small shop, and I started recruiting business, and you know, it was needed, I found out. And with her splendid cooperation, it's the only way you can start a business is to have that type of cooperation. And anyway, I think we had 5 children then, didn't we? 5 or 6, okay. I never was good at counting, but anyway, we started that, and we worked hard, and we dedicated ourselves to the business, and that's the only way you can start it. I really enjoyed what I've done. I've worked there 40 some years, and retired 20 years ago, and we now have 40 employees, and with the technology I know that's another question I was going to cover, but we need 250 to 300 people there now with the technology that's taking place in the industry. But for starting a business, it just takes dedication, hard work, and prayers.
So, Wade, I'm sure you had your hands full with 6 children, and obviously there was times like in the summer when school wasn't in. So what was there to do with kids for family fun in the area at that time when they weren't going to school every day?
Well, our children played outside with their friends and neighbors, and entertained themselves. I don't know that I had that much to do with their entertainment, but anyway, they just grew up with friends and neighbors, I guess. So.
Any establishments here, Kitty Land, or other family activities?
Pardon me?
So any of the family activities you guys at Kitty Land at that time? Or
Well, when they were old enough, they played the boys. Well, girls did too. Played softball and baseball. Yes, they were on teams, and yes, we did that. So, but anyway, that's.
Thank you, Ava. So, Dave grew up in a little west of here, I think, right, Dave? So you're going to talk about that. But we're all familiar with Greenbush being an educational facility right now and what they do and all the work in the area. But what was out there before Greenbush, or what was it like before Greenbush was there?
Well, basically, Greenbush has not changed any at all as far as anything else. The only thing that's changed is the old grocery store and the dance hall is gone. It's by the wayside. It burnt, and they never did rebuild it. So basically, the only thing that is there calling the shot is the regional service center. And employees who are there. I don't know how many people work there now, but there's quite a bunch of people. And basically, that's all that's there. I mean, the church is burnt. The old church is still standing. The newer church, renovated church, is partially there. I don't think they ever have services there anymore, but it's used once in a great while for an occasional funeral or wedding, kind of a strange mix. But anyway, basically that is it. The church basically is the only thing that is left of Greenbush. A lot of the older people have since passed away. I mean, there's really not much left out there.
Hey, but wait a minute. I've heard this story, and I'm pretty sure that dance hall was kind of hopping. Didn't something happen there?
Not that I'm aware of.
Well, you know, wait a minute. I thought you told me that my grandpa came home from service and showed up at that dance hall.
Well, again, my dad did. You're right. You're right. You're right.
Write
Yeah.
that down, it only happened once.
Yep. He come home from the army, and they brought him back from Tyler, Texas, and brought him out to Greenbush to the dance that night. That's basically. But that dance hall didn't last very long after that. It really didn't.
Now you can stop.
No, Greenbush basically is it's just dwindling. It's just about gone. But a lot of good memories, a lot of good memories, a lot of old people. There's a lot of older people still living there, but there's a lot of stories about those people out there. There's really a lot. A lot of things basically were made in basically a shed out behind the house, but there was there was a fair amount of stills in Greenbush. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, it hadn't been that long ago, 10 years ago, I used to buy bootleg and ordered it from that guy, and he would take it down a quarter of a mile from the house and set it by a fence post, and that's where you had to pick it up. You never went to the house to pick it up, you picked it up there, but it would be there. And I will say this much, it was good stuff. It was good stuff.
See Dave afterwards for information on how to buy moonshine in Southeast Kansas. So some of you probably know that already. Pam, you have a very unique and fantastic family history. You shared a little bit about your dad and the friendly here. But can you talk about some of your favorite childhood memories in the area, your time with your parents and your siblings, and what you guys used to do here in the area?
Well, when I saw the description on the booklet that I was a celebrity, I was surprised, grateful but surprised. But I'm not the celebrity. My celebrities are gone. That was my dad and my brother. Dad's name was Francis Postai. I think I already mentioned him, and my brother was Mark Postai. And on Sundays, Mom would let Dad take us out to the airport out here and go flying with him. She didn't go. That was her time to be by herself. But one of my favorite childhood memories is going flying with Dad on Sundays. Now, Mom would have had a fit if she knew. Dad was a World War II pilot, a fighter pilot. He knew how to do all of these stunts and roll the plane, and I thought it was Silver Dollar City in the back of that airplane. I'm telling you, it was fun. My brother and I sit back there, and the G-forces pull your face back, and Mom had no idea, and we were sworn to secrecy. My brother Mark went on to also be a fighter pilot. Dad fought in World War II and was shot down on Valentine's Day in 1944 at the ripe old age of 20 on his 32nd mission. Was in the hospital for 2 to 3 years after that. Came home, went to the Kansas State Teacher College out here, and met my mother, and they raised 4 children. One brother, Mark, 3 sisters, Paula, myself, and Julie. And Mark went on to also become a fighter pilot. He passed in 1982. He was flying a Russian plane called a MiG. It was a MiG-23. I think they called it the Blogger, and it was a plane that was very unstable. And at the age of 32, Mark was teaching young pilots who were coming up through the ranks how to dogfight and win against a MiG with F-16s. And the MiG was notorious for catching on fire, which it did, and took my brother with it. So, but he was doing what he loved to do, and that was fly. And he learned to do that from my dad, who also loved to fly. I think Dad would have made it a career, but when he was shot down, it took all the muscle out of his left arm. Those of you who may remember, just right around the corner at 3rd and Locust was Post-Ice One-Stop Service, which was my grandfather, L.A., and Louis Anthony, and then later on Louis Post-Ice and Francis Post-Ice, the two sons, took it over. Some of you may be familiar with Krista Post-Ice, who does so much for community health down here. So, but favorite memories, there are so many in this town. Going to the pool, being able to ride your bicycle all times of the day or night, and not have to worry about whether that kid was going to come home again. There was so much freedom in that childhood that I don't see for my children or my grandchildren right now. So, very precious place here, very precious memories.
Jerry, I know very proud of your heritage, and you said a historian. So, as a child of an immigrant family, how did you guys maintain your ethnic heritage, your traditions, while growing up in southeast Kansas, which was obviously a big melting pot?
My grandfather, Mateusz Homsik, came here from Slovenia in 1902. He had worked in the coal mines in Slovenia and then went with his brother to Germany and worked in the Ruhr Valley in the coal mines there, and then came over in 1902 by himself. He saved his money, and after 3 years he sent back to my grandmother. My grandmother was on a neighboring farm there in Slovenia, and I always think about how much faith she had, that she left her family. She never saw them again. Neither one of them ever saw their family again. Could not speak any English at all, and come to marry a man that she hadn't seen in 3 years, and to come by herself over, from the hills of Slovenia across the ocean to marry this guy. So that was kind of our heritage. Actually, I kind of have a bicultural background. My mother was Heinz 57 American, and in fact, every branch of her family came over before the Revolutionary War. So, and her family was Southern Baptist. My dad was immigrant, Slavic, Roman Catholic. So with that, you can cover the whole world with philosophies there. So, but anyway, in 1969, I was 24 years old, and I had a little break in education at that time when I was going to nurses training. And I decided this was my chance to go back to the old country, to see the old country, and so I did, and I spent 4 months in Europe during that time. I was the first one in the family to go back since my grandparents had come over, and I was able to meet my dad, some of my dad's aunts, and a whole bunch of his cousins that was still alive at that time. And so that was really a deep experience to me to really understand the cultural background that had gone on with that, and so with that, it's kind of evolved. My brothers got involved after that, and they've been back and forth the whole country a number of times. Anna and I, between us, we've been back 14 times. Anna, her background is also Slovenian. Her parents came over as refugees after the end of World War II when the communists took over Slovenia. And then it went independent in 1991, which we was happy to hear. And so we still have a lot of relation there. And when we go back, there's so many cousins to see that we can't see them all at one time. We have to kind of, well, this time we'll see this group, and the next time see that group. And so that's kind of our background.
Thank you, Jerry. If I could ask just a follow-up on that as well. So, what type of traditions, I guess, have you guys kept in your family, and how have you kept that alive?
One thing that was traditional with the Slovenes were tight, okay? I mean, we're cheap, okay? We're really tight. And that's come down through the family, you know, everybody in the family is tight. And the other thing is that the importance was property. In the old country under the Austrian Empire, the Slovenes were suppressed by the Germans from Austria. And the only way that you could have some independence in life was if you had property. If you didn't have property, you just became an itinerant worker, maybe on the farms or whatever. So it was of vital importance that a family keep the farm. And the farm that my grandfather came from, my cousins still own that. And I've tracked that back at least since 1790. The family's always had it, and that's as far back as I could go. It probably is much older than that. And his family is the same way. And so that was really important. When my grandfather got here, after he married my grandmother, they lived at Fleming, and he worked in the coal mines there in Fleming. And just within a year or so, he would start to buy little pieces of land. And he kept adding to that until in 1930, he had 160 acres there in Fleming. The coal company wanted his farm to do strip mining, and so he sold it to the coal company and bought another farm, and he added to that. And when he died in 1949, he had 360 acres. But it was showing your independence will come from owning property, and that's come down to all of us, you know, in the family. The other thing is that with our Slovene background, all of our children have Slovene first names, and all of my grandchildren have Slovene first name, and so we have that. Some of the food has come down. You know, you've all heard of patitsa, and patitsa is always made for Christmas and Easter and big holidays. My mother-in-law, Anna's mother, she was the most faithful person I've ever known. And when we got married, she couldn't do a lot for the wedding, but she could make patitsa, and she made a mountain of patitsa for our wedding. I remember.
Thank you, Jerry. Well, with the temperature, it may be hard to think about Christmas time, but obviously not too far away. When I picture Christmas here in Pittsburgh, I have the lights downtown, but I feel like so many of you probably have the memories of stores downtown that I hear stories about. So Wava, for you, what was Christmas time like in Pittsburgh? What do you remember? What was it like shopping at Christmas time for your kids, pre-Amazon, and just going downtown and doing shopping at Christmas time?
Sorry. We didn't have a lot of money at that time, and so places that I shopped was, I shopped mainly at catalogs, Five and Dimes, and that sort of thing. But it was the town was always decorated very nice for Christmas, and it was just. I'm sorry, I don't know. I'm going to pass it back to you.
Thank you. Jim, so obviously being here, a unique time in our history after the Great Depression, World War II, what was it like growing up during that time period for you guys, especially here in Pittsburgh?
During World War II.
Yeah, just during that time after Great Depression, World War II.
Well, during World War II, there was a lot of sacrifice from people. It was amazing how people got together behind with victory and peace and just supporting the troops. Everybody had victory gardens. Most of you here probably remember some of that. I can remember when it first started, the enlistment center was in the middle of the block between, 5th and 6th Street, I think, on the west side. And there were guys lined up from the middle of that block down to the next street and around the corner to sign up to go to the service. And it made you so proud of people. You couldn't buy tires. There was not unusual for cars to be going down the street without any tires, and the only thing there was, they'd ride on the rims, and the only thing was brick streets, and you could hear them coming from a mile and a half. And I remember you couldn't buy a bicycle, that was completely out, you couldn't buy a car. But when we moved into town after my father died, and the people left a bicycle in what was called the coal shed, and it was cut in half. Well, you couldn't buy a bike, so our neighbor worked at the KCS shops, and I asked him if he could take it over there and have it welded. And he said, yeah, he did. So it came back, and it had tires and neat inner tubes, it's rotted. So there was a bicycle shop on the corner of 10th and Locust, and I went up there to Mr. Stevens and said, I'd like to get some inner tubes for my bike. He said, see that poster up there with the 5 guys in a rubber raft? He said, that's where your tires are going and your inner tubes. And I felt so bad. So I went home and spent the rest of the day putting sand in the tires so that I could ride that bike. It lasted for quite a while before we could get some tires, but anyway, everybody had to do without a lot of things. I can remember, I still have my racing books, I still have them, and so much coffee, and we didn't have a car, we couldn't afford a car, but gas was rationed, and so we'd trade our gas tickets for milk and bread and whatever else we could barter with, and a lot of people did that, and so that was it through the war. To entertain ourselves, my brother and I, we would walk to this, we'd call it an elevator day. We'd walk to Stillwell Hotel, go up to the top of an elevator and come down, and then we'd go to the Kirkwood building, which was on 7th Street, and ride that up to the top. Then we'd go to the professional building and ride that one up and down. And then go across the street to the, let's see, what was that name of that building? I forget what the name of that one was, but we'd ride it, and then the finale was the Hotel Best, and boy, we'd go up 12 stories. So that was our entertainment. But like I say, it was a sacrifice, but boy, I tell you, the day when Japan surrendered, town was full of cars. Broadway was full of cars, 2 lanes going both ways, and people honking their horns and waving flags. And I mean, it went on for hours and hours, like almost 2 days. And it was really something to see. Everybody was so pleased and just on cloud 9. But it was great to see all that and live through that time. So that's the story of how we lived in the time of the war. It was so sad. It was so sad to go by a house and see that flag hanging in the window with a star on it. You knew they'd lost something.
Thank you, Jim. I'm sure that time brings back memories for some of you in here. Hopefully nothing we have to experience again in our lifetimes. On a little lighter note, switching back to thinking about some of the entertainment in the area, and Phyllis, we're not singling you out, I don't think, as far as partying goes, but how did you talk a little bit, how did teenagers spend a Saturday night here in the area?
Well, of course, we're back to the tower on Saturday night, but the tower didn't start until 8 or 9 o'clock, so we had, we came into town early, and I'm so glad to see Drag the Gut has come back, and even if it's once a month, that was the thing, and that was no matter what night you came to town, we considered that was how we would see all of our friends, we would drag the gut. And at that time, there were no cell phones or anything, so we were communicating with everyone in the car. We knew everyone in the car next to us or that met us. You saw their faces, you talked to them. So we all became really good friends because we had that close relationship. We weren't busy looking at a phone or an iPad or whatever. And we would do the Chinese fire drill, which I'm sure has to be called something else now. We can't call it that any longer, but that was always fun, and jumping out of the car and running to the other side, switching sides. And so we had our meeting places, and we would go, the White Grill at the north end of town was typically our turnaround. And that was where we always went after the tower. We had to go to the White Grill to check everyone out, who was dating who, which guys were by themselves, which girls were by themselves. So the White Grill was the turnaround there. And then at the south end of town, Griff's had gone in across from the college, which was like an early version of a McDonald's. And I think their hamburgers were like 15 cents a piece when they opened. There was French fries, maybe 10 cents for fries, but that became our turnaround at that end of town. So we would run, from one end of town to the other, and just see the same kids all night. I mean, we might make, of course, gas was cheaper then too, but I don't know how many trips we would make through town to go and wave at everybody 100 times, the same people, and we'd swap cars. You'd see somebody you'd hop in somebody else's car, they'd hop in yours, and you'd catch them on the next trip through town and go back to the car, whoever you were with and everything. Another thing of entertainment was the Fox Theater, and back in the 60s, I just remember I had a little student pass, and I think it was 50 cents was the price of a movie back then if you had that student ID. And I think back to some of the movie stars in the 60s, like Troy Donahue was the big heartthrob of the day. Everyone had to go see anything that had Troy Donahue in it, and Annette Funicello and Frankie Avalon were in all the beach movies. Elvis was in Blue Hawaii, so he was really a big thing during the 60s also. And then the A&W Root Beer was another stand, and like I said, that was at the north end of town also. So sometimes we'd turn around there at the A&W Root Beer instead of the White Grill, but that was kind of our path. And if you wanted to see your friends, you were on Broadway. That's where you were. Everybody hung out on Broadway, and if you were coming to town, that was the place to be. And it was booming, bustling. There were people all the time, but that's where the kids were. And I think we need a tower back in town, a place for the kids to go, really. I mean, to dance, and I don't know if they even dance, not like we did, back in the day. Like I say, everybody, if a song started, everyone was on their feet dancing. It was just really a big thing to dance then. So it was just a great era. I know everybody thinks their decade was wonderful, but I just have many cherished memories of that time, and I'm still very close friends with everyone from that era. Everyone that I graduated with, we're all still very close friends and everything, and we still laugh at the times. And I'll make this. This is such a funny story. I have to tell you. My mother and dad, like I say, they picked us up. I was an only child, and but they took us and picked us up at the tower and everything. And we were. There was the old expression of poor as church mice. Well, we were less than that. They were rich to us. Those people that were that poor. But they would come and pick us up. And one night, my mother came and got out of the car, and they parked to the back like we requested. Please don't park out front. We're mortified that our parents picked us up. She got out of the car and she had on a house coat. And I don't know if you remember back in the day how women used to curl their hair. They would make a little circle and put bobby pins in their hair, and that is what her hair. She had her hair in those bobby pins, and we thought we would just die. And we laughed about that to this day. Here we are at the tower, we're trying to impress all the boys, and there's my mother with her pin curls and a house coat picking us up, hollering, "Here, girls, here we are." It was absolutely horrible for us at the time, but it's funny now, and we're grateful that they took us and picked us in, so.
Good story, Kelsey. Do those places, memories bring back memories for any of you? You used to cruise along here down Main, here down Broadway. So talking 60s, Dave, growing up in Girard, what was it like to experience some world events at that time, like the assassination of President Kennedy as a boy going to school in Girard?
Well, one of the things that I really remember about the assassination of President Kennedy was, first thing off, school was let out totally, was going to be closed down. But our superintendent at that time, the board man has been gone for years, how do I say this to be nice, very anti-Catholic. The announcement was made that all of us Catholic kids, we either had to show up for that funeral that day, or we would be expelled. I mean, it was simple. And the parish priest at the time, he basically threw a fit. It got bad enough, even threatened where all of the Girard kids were going to be taken out of Girard schools and sent to St. Mary's. And it got bad enough that the bishop had to get involved in it. And they finally got it all settled where they would go ahead and let us continue to go to Girard. But I mean, it got to a point they were already making plans and had bought a school bus where they were going to start hauling kids to Girard or to Pittsburg to go to St. Mary's. But that went by the wayside. But it was pretty nip and tuck for a while. We really didn't know where we were going to wind up to go to school. But I was mortified that we were going to be transferred basically to Pittsburgh because we didn't want to go. But I still remember the parish priest telling us, I know you don't want to go, but that's tough, you're going anyway. I mean, it was already cut and dried. But no, it was quite the experience when we went through the assassination, because it took several weeks for that to all pan out before we finally got to stay in Girard and continue in Girard. But at that time, I think out of there might have been a total of 26 Catholic kids at that time. And I think when it was all said and done, I think there was a total of 2 basically transferred over to St. Mary's, and the rest of us got to stay in Girard. I can't complain about that. I mean, the school system was always good to us then after that. But it was really a bad situation for a while. Yeah.
Different times. Thank you, Dave. Jerry, I know you touched on a little bit talking about your heritage and history. What are some of your favorite family foods? You mentioned one from your wedding that stands out, but other family foods, traditions that we may not all be familiar with that you guys try to keep alive in the spirit, pass on to your kids and your kids.
Yeah, like I said before, patisa is a real Slovene food that you've all heard of, I'm sure, around the area here. There's also another one that was called zgonce. Zgonce was, it was made with buckwheat flour was the best if you use buckwheat flour. And then with lard, you would cook that until it's crumbled. And you would serve that hot with hot milk on it. And that, my mother-in-law made that all the time for my kids, and they just loved that. They ate it all the time. When I was in the old country the first time, I stayed with a couple of my dad's cousins, and I was 24 years old, so they thought, you got to feed this boy, you know. And so they would make a whole skillet of zgonce, and that, as I said, you know, it's buckwheat flour with lard in it. You know, so it's a little on the heavy side. So after I had breakfast with that, I tried to figure out some way to be gone for lunch so I wouldn't eat again until supper time. Because it would last that long. So, but anyway, that was another food that was used. And one thing I might, that's kind of a sidelight, but one thing I might mention to young men, if you are interested in a young woman, court the mother first, okay? Court the mother first. I would take letters over from the old country because I couldn't read Slovene. I can speak it a little bit, but I just kind of slop around with it. I'm really not very good at it. Anna's fluent in it, but I'm not. I'm another generation down the road. But I would get letters from the old country from relatives over there, and so I would take it over to her mother to translate them for me. And Anna always said, my mother picked my husband for me. And I was over there one time, and Anna was dating some other guy, and her mother really didn't like this guy at all. So when I was over there, she said, would you like a piece of cake? And I said, well, yeah, that'd be nice, you know. And so she got down, she cut me a slice, and she said, Anna made it, you know. And, oh, that's nice, you know. Well, Anna was on a date with this guy, and when she came back in, that was Kim's birthday, and she made that cake for his birthday. So that's kind of evolved from there.
Good story. Thank you, Gary. How many years have you been married now?
We're heading towards 50, 49.
49. Well, congratulations. It obviously worked out. Worked out well. Anyone remember getting their first TV in here? When TV came out. So, Wava, do you remember getting your guys' first TV or what that was like with local news station and just having a TV in the house for the first time?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Just you remember getting TV for the first time in your house and sort of what that was like?
Well, not really. My parents got their, and I suppose everybody did around the early 50s. But no, I'm sorry, but I really don't know.
Keeping on the technology realm, Jim, you touched on it a little bit, I'm sure, over your career with the business and otherwise. I saw a lot of changes in technology. Can you talk a little about what you've seen over that time?
Well, the technology has affected many things, but in my trade, in the machining trade, when I was apprentice, the machines, we'd cut steel at 100 feet a minute. That was the maximum we could use for the cutting tool we used. Now, with the CNC machines and the technology, the tooling, everything has graduated to where they're turning at 1,500 feet a minute. I mean, these CNC machines are incredible. When we got our first one about 20-some years ago, the boys, my son, two older sons, they were adamant to get it. I wasn't crazy about it, but I said, okay, let's do it. And after I seen that thing move, I said, the first thing I want to know is where's the stop button? Because that's all I ever did learn about it, because I couldn't program them, I couldn't do it. They have a mastered it. It's incredible what the technology and the machining and the tooling industry has done. That's why some of you remember in the late 40s and early 50s, a automobile with 70 to 100,000 miles, you had to get them overhauled. You know, nowadays they're running 250, 270 because of the technology and the metallurgy trade and in the machining trade. They can make things so close to tolerance. It's just incredible that they run 3 times longer than they used to. But everything is that way. Most of them are just made to where they tell me at the motor companies they'll put a transmission on a stand and they'll time it to how many miles it'll run, and so that's where they put the warranty. So, but everything is just, look at the airplanes, and I mean, all of us in here I've lived through some wonderful times to see technology grow the way it has, and I just think it's incredible. But that's the story of, it's affected our trade very much. It has very many trades, even the medicine and all that, it's just incredible.
Going back down, Dave, obviously, Gerard has some fantastic history in national, presence with things that took place in Gerard. So were there some infamous people that lived in Gerard as well?
Yeah, there was a fair amount of them that lived over there. But one of the things that I really remember, I was about 13 or 14 years old, and I was going dove hunting with a cousin of mine out of Greenbush. Never thought too much about it, and there was a guy pulled up and asked if he could hunt dove with us where we were at. Of course, we didn't care. He was older, and we didn't care. Well, to make a long story short, the man that wanted to hunt with us had a car full of people with him. His name was Joey Ayuba. Really, that didn't mean anything to me whatsoever, other than the fact when I got home and told what we had done and who we had hunted with, first thing I was told was, don't tell anybody else that you know anything about this. I mean, it scared me to death, but we were treated like kings with those people. I mean, they treated us like, well, the best food I ever had in my life, because he had more food in his car than we had at home. It was really amazing. It was quite the place.
Now, wait a minute. I thought she threw holy water on you.
Pardon me?
I thought Grandma threw holy water on
Oh,
you.
well, yeah, but that was a good given at our place. So, anything you did wrong at our house, you got sprinkled. It didn't make a difference what you done.
Phyllis, I know very involved with Miners Hall Museum, a lot of mining history, and I think a lot of mining history experts in here. So any events that stick out in your mind that are related to coal mining history that folks in here might not be familiar with, especially some that maybe on a national level even, that we may not just know the full story of?
Well, there's just two things that come to mind that I'd like to share with you, and one is a more current issue, and then the other one is like 100 years ago. But I'll start with the new one that some of you may have already heard about, that we think is going to bring national attention to all of Southeast Kansas. We've acquired a piece of equipment that has been donated by the Wilkinson family, and after doing all of our due diligence and our research, it will be the only preserved walking dragline in the entire United States. We have people from the East Coast, West Coast, who have already contacted us, and they'll be coming when the move is made. It is a big piece of equipment. It is not as big, as large as Big Brutus, but it is as unique as Big Brutus. So we think it's going to be a great boom for the area, and we think we're going to receive a lot of national attention. It is a Page, which is the company name, Page 618 dragline, and due to now being online and the easy access, one of the family members from California has contacted us, and they are like stunned that we have this piece of equipment. There were only 18 made, and what was unique about the company is they built their own engines. This man, his name was Page, John Page. They built their own engines in this company, and that was put in this equipment, where most draglines, steam shovels, they bought their engines elsewhere. And the Wilkinson family does have the original engine, so we will have that also as a part of the display to even make it more of a unique thing. So we think this is going to be our day and age of the national publicity we're going to gain, because we've just had too many contacts from all over the country. People are very excited about this project. And you can watch all the media has been good to help us with coverage, and we'll be announcing when the move is made. It's coming from in Cherokee County, and it's going to be placed at Gennardi's Corner, which will now be known as the Dragline Park, which is 69 and 47, right there as you're coming into Franklin, where the Welcome to Franklin sign is. That's where it's going to be placed. The museum owns that piece of property, and we've gotten all the approval from the state and everyone, and we'll be placing it there. And he hopes to, the company that we've acquired, they moved the train, the engine from here in Pittsburg out to Corona, so they're finishing up some jobs, because once they start on our project, they want to stick with it and finish it, and it's going to be a lengthy project. They hope to get started sometime by the end of September, so we'll be making an announcement, but it'll take them about 30 days to disassemble it and prepare for the move up here, and then we'll be making announcements. They're wanting to make a big deal about the move and have kids along the street with flags, and everyone's really excited about it, so you'll be reading about that in the paper. So that's our current national, what we hope will be our national story, but our museum tells a larger national story from the 1920s, and I'm not really the best person to talk about this, but I will just give you a little bit. In 1921, for those of you may have heard of the Amazon Army, and we have the expert here, who is NelioKnoll. Linda's produced a magnificent play. For those of you who have seen it, it was just outstanding. She's researched, and she knows everything from top to bottom about this topic. What I can tell you, it was thousands of women marched on the mines in protest of the working conditions. The miners were striking, and they gained national attention, and the New York, one of the newspapers dubbed them the Amazon Army, so that's where the name came from. We have a lot of history at the museum about them. You can learn more. We have a beautiful art piece that was donated to the museum. One of the coal buckets from the SEK Art Fest was designed to tell the story of the Amazon Army, and that was purchased for us and donated to the museum. We have murals that tell their story. And there's a lot more that goes with that. But it was in 1921. So in 2021, Linda hosted an exhibit for a year-long exhibit, and she created a Christmas ornament. She worked with the post office to get a special postmark that was only available about one day, the actual day of the march. So there is a lot of history there that you can learn. I don't know where we're on time. Linda, you want to have Linda say a few words? She can definitely say more than I can.
Talk about Southeast Kansas history, I could be up here a long time. This is wonderful having stories being told, because that's how we get to preserve our history and we get back to our memories. Phil Martin is sitting out here. He has a lot of memories from his family. In fact, Phyllis, we're trying to get Phil to give us his family history and some of his pictures and his stories, because he was a part of the coal mining history also. I mean, just so many families. You think about the immigrants who came over here on those ships, most of them on the bows of the ships, with very little other than the fact, some of them trying to escape persecution from their countries, some of them just from poverty, some of them just because they heard about the American dream. And all of us here have benefited from that, especially I think from education, because most of these women that Phyllis was just mentioning, the Amazon Army women, were mostly married. They were just standing up, they thought, for a very important issue, which was the fact that the mines were so unsafe for their children, their husbands. People were dying just practically every day. Not only unsafe conditions, but the fact that they were having to pay for twice what a can of beans would cost you at the company stores, having to pay for all the, their men would have to pay for all their mining tools, just so many things that were unfair. And they stood up when it was a time when it was very difficult to stand up. And some of the reforms that came later, like the 8-hour workday and safer mining conditions, and all those things that were legislated later, they stood up for when it wasn't popular. In fact, ministers would argue against the 8-hour workday. They'd say, well, we can't let men, just work a third of the day. What kind of, trouble would they get into? And business people believed that children should be working so products would cost less. And these people, before anyone really thought about it, before, all the reforms, they stood up and a lot of times, sacrificed their lives. And I'll just say this, all those women, all of them, Mary Skubitz said there were 6,000 of them, none of them talked about it. None of them mentioned it later. That was just part of their lives. It was only after 50 years or whatnot when we started asking questions. I asked my I had no idea. I asked my grandmother, because Jean de Gruson had written a poem, and I happened to have the poem. And she just matter of factly said, she was 88 years old, Maggie O'Nelio, and she said, yeah, I was in that march. And I said, you never told me, no. And she goes, well, you never asked. and that's what we're encountering now. We're uncovering our history. Miners Hall Museum is really just a collection of all of that history that we're uncovering because people just did it, and they just did what they had to do, and they gave us the lives we have. And so we're just so fortunate to be able to be here. It's so nice to hear all these stories here from all of us, all the way to the people who served in the war and who started businesses here, people who are in the farms, people who are involved in education. And I just will say this, that the women, one of the things they all believed in, they gave money, even when they had no money to give to the schools, because they knew it was a way for their children to get, out of those unsafe conditions. So anyway, that's a little bit, so thank you very much.
I have just a little follow-up to that. I just want to say that Southeast Kansas wasn't known for its passive women, okay? And there was little need for a feminist movement here. They were pretty strong. And it's kind of reflected in, the Slovenes had a lot of colorful sayings and things, and one of those has to do with the baby being born. It was the custom that when a baby was born in the old country, the mother was supposed to go to bed for 10 days, okay? But they couldn't spare the mother for 10 days, so the father went to bed for 10 days.
Linda, thank you for coming up and speaking this evening. We're to the end of our scripted questions, but if Angela doesn't mind me going off a little more off script here too, how many of you have been in the Frisco Event Center before, know the history of this? So a decent amount, but Larry, can I put you on the spot? Would you like to talk for just a minute about, you shared with me multiple times the fantastic history of this building, what it means to Pittsburgh, what happened here. Would you mind sharing just a little bit with everyone?
Sure. Mackey Clemens was one of the largest privately owned coal companies in the United States. They started here in about 1890. This particular building was built in about 1878. I'll quickly tell you how this building was bought. I worked for the Kansas City Southern for 40 plus years and was gone for about 35 years and came back. A lot of different locations and things. But even when I was still working, I told my wife, I said, I'm going to buy this building. We come here for Christmas sometime. That building's still sitting there empty. It looks like crap. It had a cable all the way around it. Had a cottonwood tree growing up through the roof right over there. It was in bad shape. And so I retired and I had a little bit of money. I had a good career. And I got a hold of the Mackeys and they said, you can't buy it. The damn thing's been bankrupt for years. You can't buy it. They're still in court. So I got a phone number from, went to school with one of the Mackeys and got a phone number and I called them. And it was a Friday afternoon, sat at the kitchen table and I called and The gentleman answered the phone, lady answered the phone, said, well, I'll put you in. Put me in his office, and he answered the phone. I said, my name's Larry Fields, I live in Pittsburgh. I noticed the old Frisco Depot is in pretty bad shape. I shouldn't have said that. I said, I've retired recently from the railroad industry, and I'm interested in acquiring it. I'd be interested in buying that. And he said, what'd you say your name was? And I said, my name is Larry Fields. And he said, well, Mr. Fields, is there a for sale sign there? And I said, no, sir, I didn't see one. He said, what the hell did you call me for? And he hung up. I wanted to call him back, but I didn't. My wife said, he's as big a jackass as you are. And that's what she said. I said, he's not that big a jackass. And I waited a week. About the same time, a week later, on Friday, I called again. And a lady named Kay answers the phone. They're now not, and Mackey's still in business. They're still a big company, a very wealthy company. They own rock quarries and gas mines and oil wells and copper pipe plants. So they're still around. This lady named Kay says, well, I'll put you in, Mr. Fields, if that's what you want to do. So she put me in there, and he answers the phone. I said, no, I don't want to bother you. I said, it's Larry Fields in Pittsburgh. I'm really interested in buying the Frisco Depot. He said, well, didn't I talk to you last week? I said, yes, sir, you did. He said, well, what the hell did you call me for? And he hung up. He said, he done that twice. And so I thought, one more time. So I called the third week on a Friday. This nice lady named Kay answers the phone, and she says, Mr. Fields, you're talking to the wrong person. And I said, really? I said, who do I need to be talking to? She said, you need to be talking to Maxine. I said, well, who's Maxine? I said, well, it used to be Maxine Mackey. So then the light went on. It's her money. It ain't that jackass's money. So she said, I'm going to give you a phone number, but don't tell anybody where you got this phone number. And you wait 10 minutes and call. And I did. I called, and the phone rang one time, and the lady answered it. She said, is this Mr. Fields? I said, well, this is Larry Fields. And yes. She said, I've got some questions for you. What do you plan to do with that building? I said, I'm going to do my very best to get it back as close as I can to the original. She said, are you lying to me? It's like that. I said, no, I'm not lying to you, not at all. I said, that's what I want to do. That's what I'll try to do. And I said, I'll do my best to do that. She said, I'm going to ask you again. Are you lying to me? I said, no, I'm not. She said, are you going to do like that damn college in the city of Pittsburgh? I said, I don't know what you're talking about. This was pre-block 22, okay? She said, they have plans to tear that building down for parking and use our old office because they're going to do some stuff downtown, which they have done a great job with. Great job. Increased the great value of this property for me. But this was pre-block 22. So she said, you call Monday morning at 10 o'clock. Call the office. You have the phone number. I have the number. So about 9:55 on Monday, I called. Kay answered the phone. She said, I'll put you in just a minute. And she waited until 10 o'clock and put me in there. And put me on the speakerphone. And the man said, Mr. Fields, I told you I didn't want to sell this, but we've had some discussions. And he said, I want to know something. He said, and then Maxine said, let me talk. She said, let me talk. She said, I believe this man. I think he's going to do what he said he's going to do. And I want you to sell it to this man. He said, no, I've been working with a college in the city of Pittsburgh to tax credits and things, and we've been working on this for 2 or 3 months. She said, I said sell it to this man. And he said, I'm going to put you on hold a minute and call him. So put me on hold. I was on there for a couple of minutes to come back on. He said, okay, I'll sell it to you. You got to close in 10 days. I said, okay. I was making that up. I said, okay, that's fine. He said, we're going to close in Ottawa up here at the office. I said, that's fine. That's okay. No problem. I said, okay. He said, we'll send you a contract. Give me your address. And I did. He didn't tell me how much money it was. And I didn't ask. I was afraid to ask because I was afraid he'd tell me. So I didn't know what it was going to cost. So I got the contract, and it was about 8 pages long. And it was within 10 days to close. So I made arrangements for the money, and it got it the old-fashioned way. I borrowed it mostly. But I had enough money to do the deal, I thought. So I go up there. I got up there at 9 o'clock. Got there about 15 minutes early at their offices. And he was sitting in the office with the door open, and they let me sit out in the ante area out there, and he was reading the Kansas City Star, flipping it back and forth. Act like he was reading the Kansas City Star. And he lets me in, and Maxine come in about the same time I was going into the office. And that's when I met her. And he said, okay, here's the contract, you read it? I said, yes. He said, okay, this is the amount of money. And I said, well, that's too much money. And I'm trying to how to negotiate, which is not the time and place to be doing it. I waited too long, but I said, it's really way more money than it's worth. He said, you either do this deal or leave now. So I said, okay, I'll do the deal. He said, I want the money tomorrow, and I had a certified check that I had cleared, but there wasn't enough money. So I had to come back the next day with the check, which I did, and paid him. And so I got that done. He wrote in the margin and said, I need 90 days to get stuff out. I had 5,000 or 6,000 deeds and things from that Mackie Clemens had stored here. These chandeliers came out of the Hotel Best, out of the Hotel Stillwell, by the way, out of their, and the whole roof was gone from this beam right here to the end. This all is original floor in here, but so we got that done and we got it purchased. The thing I didn't realize until I read that contract and I sat there reading it, I wasn't buying this building, I was buying both buildings. So that made the price up, but I didn't realize that. So it turned out to be quite a good deal. So that's sometimes being dumb and being willing to do something, you're better off. So these things are hard to buy, they're hard to, because there are a lot of people tried to buy it over the years. But if you get a hold of the right person, and Maxine Mackey had caught passenger trains right here, went to New York and Florida, Pensacola. They made regular summer trips to Pensacola with her dad and her grandpa. So she had an emotional tie to it. And so that made a huge difference to her. She didn't want the building tore down. She didn't want a parking lot over here. She didn't care so much what happened next door to it. That was Mackie Clemens' headquarters next door. And that's a really, really good building. It was a good buy, as it turned out. So sometimes you're really fortunate. But this has been a good building, and I think Jim mentioned World War II ended. There's a photograph that I have a copy of it, and there's about 100,000 people up and down 4th Street and up and down Broadway at the end of World War II. And there were 6 passenger trains ran in here, and they couldn't even get out of town. There were so many of them here, so many people. So it was quite an event. This is a good building, built by the Kansas City, Fort Scott, and Memphis, not the Frisco. That railroad was owned by the Frisco, but that was every state a railroad operated in prior to 1906, you had to have headquarters. So the Frisco was headquartered at St. Louis, Missouri. Kansas City, Fort Scott, and Memphis, owned by the Frisco, headquartered in Kansas City. NEO owned Pittsburg, Kansas City, Pittsburg, and Gulf is the Kansas side for the KCS. But that changed later, so it's all Frisco. So it's a good old building. It's on the National Historic Site. The Mackie Clemens, the Pitcraft building down the street is on the National Historic Site now. And I was part of a group that purchased the Washington School. And my job, it's somebody else's money. It's a lot easier to buy something when you use somebody else's money. It makes it a whole lot easier. And so I got that thing done to purchase, all private money, and it's now on the National Register. There'll be work starting on that by the end of the year. The plan is for a daycare. And so far, 100% of the money down there has been donated, all of it. So, and it's going to be donated. So there's some good old buildings. And being on the National Register provides a lot of good stuff. So, but this is a good building. I'm proud of it, and I'm glad you're all here and enjoying it. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. You put on a spot and sharing that story. As Wendy said, really nice to sit around like you may have back in the day and tell some stories and hear some history. So we have a few minutes left and want to open it up. Does anybody have any burning questions for our group up here, or something you would like to ask or reminisce about yourselves? Please feel free to ask a question. Yeah, if you want to come up here so everybody can hear you, unless you have a very loud voice, or I can repeat it.
Has Maxine seen this renovation?
Maxine came down and brought 4 or 5 grandkids and grandchildren. They spent the night here. Yeah, Maxine came down. I've got to be good friends with her. She was 96 when they came down. She loves the building. Put the deck on it and things, and she just loves it. And I think it was. I bought this I bought this first. I think it was 16 when I bought it, and it took 14 months to get it put back together. The floors. These they call these true 2x4s are about 5 inches tall, and underneath it's a 1x12 runs north south, and then a 1x12 east west. So you got about 8 inches of wood, but the floor was all mushy and gone. This was a resort for with the roof gone. This was a resort for pigeons and some wild cats for a long time. So the floor was gone. We laid $44,000 to the floors to put the floor back the way it was. And I wanted to go back the way it was, and this is fur, it's kiln dried, but it still shrinks a bit, so it doesn't fit as good as I'd like. But it took 9 days to lay the floor, and for the first 3 or 4 days, they prayed nice and sang and whistled, and after that, they cussed like sailors. But it was a real chore. But Maxine come in, she loves the building, I get Christmas cards from her now. She still owns a home in Pittsburg on South Catalpa. She doesn't come here often, she's still living. Her husband still doesn't like me, but it's okay.
Thank you, Larry.
When I was a kid, I carried the interline mail for the KCS Railroad. I was in and out of this building. When I was a kid, I carried the interline mail for the KCS Railroad. I was 9 years old when they asked me to start doing that. And I was in this building probably 4 or 5 times a week. In the front there, when the Railway Express trucks used to be backed up to these doors and they'd load for the local. They were like the UPS today. But I can remember that history.
You know, most everybody knows the history of the coal in the Cherokee Weir line. Something very few people realize is there were 6 railroads in Pittsburgh, 6 of them. And between 22 and 28% of the total coal dug was consumed by those railroads. Railroads had their own mines, so you know that's a big chunk of that business. And the only way you could move the coal, you know, it was a symbiotic relationship. They had to have each other in order to move it. So they burned a lot of coal. And I've got a plaque that Mackie Clemens received from the Frisco Railroad promoting the 500,000th carload of coal. And I tried to give that back to Mackie, but they said, no, leave it here. So it's actually in my office. I got an office at home and it's in there. But 500,000 is a lot. Of course, the coal car started out at 40 tons. Today they're 130 tons. So, but that's a lot of coal.
Thank you, Larry. Any other questions? We have just a minute or two left here. Well, thank you all for joining us. Will you please have a round of applause for all of our speakers here this evening? Certainly want to thank as well the questions. Like I said, to ask the questions. Thank you to Angela Meyer, LaDonna Flynn for working on the questions and setting this all up. So let's give them a round of applause as well. Angela, wrap up here.
So let's give Devin a big round of applause. Great job, everyone. We hope to make this a yearly tradition. We hope to keep this on YouTube every year, so we built a brand new internet channel so you can watch these videos of the educational events and the historical events we're going to do every year during the festival. So make sure you follow us on Facebook. We'll post the link. Check out all the other festival events. We have tons to offer this weekend. Check out the Ben Haggard concert, special preview of that. Ben is bringing his brother Noel, and all of the people that are playing in a 5-piece band all played with Merle Haggard originally. So we have a Merle Haggard concert, less Merle Haggard. So be sure to use your passports, make sure they get marked, drop them off with a drawing. If you have questions, please stick around. But we truly, I'm gonna say this and please don't be offended, having been maybe the younger person demographic in the room, this is special to me. I grew up hearing really cool stories from a lot of people in this room. I was the auctioneer's kid that heard them all my lifetime and loved them, and I'm here because of those stories. So I'm hoping that we can continue the younger generation and encourage them to come to events like this so they can learn about their hometown and their communities, because that's how we pass this on. So thank you for coming. Please be safe going home, and we'll hope to do this again next year with a new panel. Thank you.